Hi everyone, I'm Annie from Manor Farms Homestead. Today I'm going to be doing a video showing you how to make cultured butter. Now I've done a video in the past where I showed you how to make sweet cream butter, and just to make a note of something that I learned about making sweet cream butter, I did not in that video let my cream come up to room temperature, but that is helpful at getting your butter to come together much quicker than if you use cold cream. So that's just a side note. What we're actually doing here is making butter the old-fashioned way. Our grandparents, great-grandparents, when they made made buttermilk, and butter was the fat content of that rose to the top when they churned it. So we're doing a modern spin on making cultured butter. I'm not going to be using a churn, but I will be using my blender, and I will be culturing it with buttermilk. So let's get started. First of all, you're going to need heavy whipping cream, and since I have a milk cow, we utilize raw, unpasteurized, unhomogenized milk around here. I have a ample supply of heavy cream. So I'm going to show you first how I separate the cream off my milk. So when you have unhomogenized milk, all of the cream rises to the top of your jug and you can just pour off the cream. Sometimes you'll get a little milk mixed in with it. That's okay. Our byproduct of making this cultured butter will be actual buttermilk that you can use in cooking. So I have a gallon of milk here, and it's sometimes hard to see on camera, but the cream line, yeah, you can see that pretty well. All of your cream rises to the top of the gallon. All right, so I have this pot here that we're going to put our cream into, and what I do to separate this is just gently pour. Don't tilt your jug too heavily downwards. Just enough to pour, but keeping the tip of the spout facing kind of upwards. And that'll drain the cream and leave your milk. Now the longer milk sits, you'll get more of a kind of congealed, almost clotted appearing cream on top, which is a little bit harder to pour out, but this is pretty fresh milk, so my cream just pours off the top. And I do leave some cream in the gallon of milk so that we're not drinking skim milk, but we don't need the amount of cream that my Jersey produces. And then this is what we have left. And then we'll drink that as, I guess it could be considered part skim, but honestly I leave enough cream that it's probably fairly consistent with whole milk that you would get from the store. The whole milk you get from the store is consistently a 3% milk, and they skim down just to give you that amount of fat in the milk. If you've got a milk cow, you know that she produces way more than 3% cream fat whenever half your gallon is cream. Now moving on, we have a few more quarts of cream that I've skimmed off of some other milk. We're going to go ahead and get that into this pot. I've got about a gallon of heavy cream now in my pot, and what I'm going to do is add a couple of cups of cultured buttermilk, and this is buttermilk that I have made previously from making butter. It's pretty thick. It actually cultured a little bit longer than it really had to, so it's chunky, but it smells great. It smells just like buttermilk. It's just a little past the ideal point of culturing. Okay, we have a total of about a gallon of heavy cream, and to that I have added 2 cups of cultured buttermilk, and that's going to serve as our base mesophilic culture that will culture the cream and ultimately produce cultured butter. So the reason I put all of this cream into a stainless steel pan is because I intended to heat it. Technically, this could sit out on the counter and come up to room temperature, but I've found the best thing is to heat it quickly to about 72 to 75 degrees, and then take it off the heat and let it sit out on your counter for about 8 hours. That's going to enable the culture to bloom and culture the entire pot of cream. So we're going to get this heated up and then just place it on our counter to sit for about 8 hours. The cream is up to temperature now, so we're going to pull this off of the stovetop and just allow it to ripen for about 8 hours before we actually churn this in our blender to make butter. Make sure you cover your cream with a lid while it sits for the 8 hours. So it's been a week since we did the first part of this video where we cultured our cream for our butter. Then we got really busy that Sunday and I did not have time to finish making butter at the end of the day. So what I actually did, I took all of the cultured butter and poured it into a gallon jug and just froze it. So here we are a week later, I've got time to deal with it, and we're going to use this cultured cream that's ready to go. I did unthaw this about probably 36 hours ago to get it to completely come up, to completely defrost and come up to room temperature. So we're ready to go. What I typically do with my cultured cream, I use my Ninja blender and I pour it to about the 48-ounce mark, and that gives it, that's about halfway. It gives it plenty of room to expand whenever it whips it to whipped cream, and then you'll see the line drop back, the milk line drop back down as it turns into butter, and you'll have separation of your butter, your fats, solids, and your actual milk portion of it. It smells like buttermilk right now. Whenever you freeze milk, cream, anything, make sure you leave head space because it expands as it freezes. Otherwise, you'll burst your jug in the freezer. But if you ever run out of time making butter, it's completely perfect to freeze it and come back to it later. The warmer your cream is, when I say warm, it as close as you can get it to about 72, 75 degrees, it will make butter much faster at that temperature compared to a little bit cooler. It's a really cold day today, and I would say our room temperature is probably around 61 degrees, something like that. So this is going to take a little bit longer. Typically when your cream is at about 75 degrees, it will churn into butter with just one spin on the Ninja. So right now, this is turned to pretty much like whipped cream right now. Okay, we're going to continue going until we get separation of the butter solids and the buttermilk. You'll see this line clearly drop whenever it turns into butter. Once it turns into butter, you want to churn it just a little bit longer, maybe a minute longer, just to make sure that you have your butter solids firm up a little bit. Otherwise, they'll be really soft and you'll have to work them more in your rinse water. So this is almost at butter consistency. We're very thick whipped cream right now. You could see the line on the outside of the blender begin to drop. I usually will scrape any excess off the top so that we get all of this turned into butter. One more spin. So we're watching for this to turn almost watery, not watery, but milky. It'll go from that thick, churning kind of consistency to everything blending around really fast. We're almost there. This is very early butter. I'm going to just scrape down my edges so that all this whipped cream up at the top gets churned. Again, I go back to this would have come together really quickly if it hadn't been so cold. So as you saw, that got really thin. It was the separation of your buttermilk from your actual butter flakes, and it lost that real thick whipped cream consistency. So here we are. Our butter is all on the top. This is all of our butter. And we're gonna take this down. Now my hands are very clean. I use my hands in my butter, but make sure your hands are clean. I usually keep a sink of soapy bleach water that I wash my hands throughout the process of making butter. You're going to want to make sure you have something ready to set your utensils and all on. And it's separated from our buttermilk. I usually will use my spatula just to kind of form it together a little bit before I reach down in there and grab that big blob of butter. So we're just going to take this big chunk of butter out of there. And this is why it's important to have very clean hands. All right, so we've got our first ball of butter. This is going into ice water, and that's where we're going to wash it. The remaining butter in here, I'm going to get together as much of it as I can. Just pulling it out like this. Then we're going to strain our buttermilk through this nylon strainer. I'll take my big ball of butter and collect up any of these flakes that are left over there. Usually they'll just stick to it and it'll pull them out of there. It's not working really well right now. And you have to knead your butter to get all the milk out of it. You'll release more and more of the buttermilk as you knead it. We're going to collect all of the butter off of the edges of our Ninja because we've got more cream to do another batch. So I just use a silicone or rubber spatula to grab up that butter off the edges so that we're ready to go with our next batch. And it's okay to have butter all over your hands and equipment throughout the process. It's a buttery process throughout.
How much butter do you get out of a gallon?
It depends on how much of it is actually milk and how much of it's actually cream, because you're going to have different, just depending on when you strained it off the milk, if you got more butter or more milk mixed in with it. Typically I get about 8 ounces of butter, 8 to 10 ounces off of a quart of what I call heavy cream, but it may not fully be heavy cream. It's just where I pour the cream off the top of the gallon. All right, so this needs to be salted. I've got some flaky sea salt here. I see you brought me the other salt, Evie.
Just in case.
So we've got salt, and I just knead that in. So we're going to continue to work and wash this. The ice water pulls all of the fat together and keeps it from melting as you're working with it, because as you work with it, your hands warm it up and it gets softer and you have to dip it back in to cool it back off. Additionally, the water is to rinse the milk from the butter. Your butter will keep longer if you get all of the milk out of it. Which is just a process of kneading it. That's pretty good. It's not squishing when I press it together or knead it, so it's pretty well washed out. I have the second bowl that's not as icy cold, that's just a final rinse water to make sure that I'm not pulling off a lot of milk solids. So hopefully this water stays pretty clear. That's our goal. Once you've done this a few times, you get a feel for it and you can tell when you've pretty much got all the milk out of your butter. So use this water just to do a final rinse. And I make mine into just like little loaves. So I usually will package mine in parchment paper. Slam it down so that it squares it off. And then I'm going to wash my hands and show you how I fold this up and get it into a bag. All right, so for packaging it, just wrap it around. And I've had it on all 4 corners to kind of get it into a block. Actually, all 6 corners, the ends too. So that gets us into a nice square block. We're going to see how much that weighs. Of course, the parchment paper weighs a tiny bit, but that is 11.6 ounces of butter, probably about 11 ounces of butter. I usually put 2 of these blocks into a freezer bag, pop it in my freezer, and pull one out as I need it. So we have all of our buttermilk here from making the butter. This is true cultured buttermilk that you would use in your cooking for biscuits, cornbread, whatever you use buttermilk in. So we're just going to get this poured into a jug. Smells just like buttermilk. It looks a little thin compared to what I usually have. When I don't make butter and just make buttermilk out of milk, it's a little bit thicker, but this has been blended heavily in the Ninja, so it looks a little thinner, but it smells just like buttermilk. It will thicken some as it sits in your refrigerator. And this stuff will keep for weeks and weeks because it's full of the good lactobacillus that keep the other bad bacteria from having any impact on your milk. We have the remainder of our cream to finish making butter out of. I set it by the heater to try to bring it a little bit higher in temperature, so hopefully it moves faster with our next batch. But that's it for making cultured butter. It's pretty simple, straightforward, very similar to making sweet cream butter minus the 8-hour time span you use to culture your cream. This has a lot more flavor and will keep better than sweet cream butter, so that's why I've ended up pretty much just exclusively using this method to make our butter rather than using sweet cream to make our family's butter. So I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something. If you did, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.